Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. So I wanted to do a video on Escape from Tarkov settings, and more so on Escape from Tarkov settings while streaming on a single PC. And the reason for that is because over the last, couple months, I've been playing it on and off, and I've noticed there are some, I guess, gotchas when it comes to trying to stream single PC and play Escape from Tarkov, because the game is exceptionally sensitive to other full screen and other sources that consume GPU, even if your GPU itself isn't anywhere near its limit. So let's go over some settings. I'm going to show you some do's and some don'ts, and hopefully by the end of it, you can get a more solid stream or a more solid recording if you're doing things like, for YouTube and whatnot. And yeah, with that said, let's hop in it and let's check it out. All right, so before we hop into this too far, I want to kind of show you guys some of the things that I'm using today to show you guys the difference between what some settings may do and what some settings may not. So aside from visual quality and visual clarity, I'm going to be using MSI Afterburner. It's the program I use to overclock my video card, and then Riva Tuner Statistics Server in order to get the on-screen overlay that you kind of see right here on the left-hand side. I've got two other YouTube videos on how to set those up in case you guys want to do this on your end, so feel free to check those out. But we're going to be using that, and then for the specifics, it's the system's a 9900K, a 32 gigs of RAM, RTX 2080, and a 970 EVO Plus. Everything, well, sans the 970, everything is overclocked pretty far. So that's kind of the disclaimer. Going to be playing today at 1080p at 144. Well, when I say playing, I mean looking at the game. I'm not actually going to play it. And then the stream itself is going to be running at 1080p 60 using the new NVIDIA encoder, and then just some absurd bitrate to make sure I get really good quality. So let's get into the game and let's get into Tarkov. So one of the things that you're going to notice right now is if you look on the left side of the screen on the bottom, I've got my FPS chart, and that thing is dancing all over the place. Now, Tarkov, if you guys are playing it, you know that like the frame rate happens to jump a lot. Now, one thing I've noticed with this game is it is exceptionally sensitive to other windows and other programs that also require GPU. So right now in OBS, I've got my preview enabled, right? So I can see my setup and everything in the middle. Now, if you're going to stream this, disable the preview, okay? If you're not streaming and you're just watching this, if you've got YouTube, if you've got Twitch, if you've got any of those things open, it will do this to your frame rate and get it so it's just jumping all over the place. So if I come over here to OBS and I disable my preview, you'll notice how much less that Tarkov's frame rate jumps. Now, I'll get an image up and I'll post it in this video, but when I don't even have OBS running at all, that frame rate is almost a perfect flat line. And so even though OBS isn't taking up any main usage because the preview is disabled, it still has an impact on the frame rate. And so, for example, we open up, say, Chrome, and you can see already, just from having Chrome open, how much more we're getting jitter, I guess, if you will, on this. And if we head over to, I don't know, pick any stream, see what 1G's up to, and he's playing Tarkov. As I kind of mouse over some of these things, this isn't too terrible. I've noticed that YouTube is a lot worse. If I put him over here and I go full screen, look at that. Look how bad that is. As chat pumps in, as my mouse moves, I'm dropping down to 108 frames per second. It depends on what the see, like if I move my mouse over here over the Twitch window, look how bad that frame rate gets and how much it dances. Because again, the game, I thought I had it on mute. The game really does fight for resources, even when your system has a ton of it. You'll notice up here in the top left, my GPU is chilling, no pun intended. But it's only being used to like 36, all right, 40, we'll say 40% of its capacity. And even though it's only at 40%, it still can't run the game totally smooth when something else is running. So the game itself does not do well. So if I close Twitch and we just come back, look how much smoother that frame rate is. So if you're trying to play and you're trying to stream, I highly recommend anything external that you've got running that you don't need to have running, shut it down. Even if you're not streaming and you're running extra stuff, shut that down as well, and it'll make your frame rate much, much smoother. And this is just on the menu. We're not even in game. So this is like literally looking at like a static screen without a whole lot going on. And again, I'll get an image of it when I'm not streaming and I'm not recording, and it's even a lot less flat, even with the little bit that I've got going on. Okay. So that's one thing to really, like, it's probably the biggest improvement that I've noticed when I stream, is to get rid of all the extra stuff. In terms of your frame rate, okay, there are a few different, you know, theories, this and that out there. The most reliable way that I've found to lock your frame rate at your monitor's refresh rate, because the game will not go over your monitor's refresh rate reliably from what I've tried to figure out. I've tried to break it a billion times, and I broke it once. I broke it one time. The game ran at 300 FPS, and it felt like a different game, and it was amazing. But I can't figure out how I broke it, and so I haven't been able to break it again. I'm still trying. If I can figure it out and I can do it consistently, I'll let you guys know, because like, it felt really good. Anyway, so to get your frame rate up, to cap it out at 144, you're gonna need to do a couple things, right? So you want to go into your graphics. You want to make sure that VSync is enabled here in the game. I know that's like not what we do, and it's like the opposite of what we do in every other game. This game, you want it on. And then I found that whether it's borderless or full screen, it seems to work pretty consistently anyway. And then the other side of this is you're going to go into your NVIDIA control panel. And then in your NVIDIA control panel, you want to make sure that here vertical sync is turned off. So you want it on in the game, but you want it off in the control panel. While we're here, I'm going to talk about two other settings. Well, one setting here and then another setting somewhere else. But here, what you guys want to do is you want to make sure that when you go to your power management mode, oh, by the way, my bad. First time you load in to your control panel, you'll probably be on this screen right here. You just want to come over here to 3D settings, manage 3D settings. That's what you're looking for. Okay. So power management mode, this is probably going to be in, if you've never messed with it before, optimum power or some shiznit. It's going to be optimum something. I don't want to click on it because it could mess up the video, but anyway, hit the drop down and make sure it's on prefer maximum performance. And what this does is it says F it to any kind of like power conservation, and it just lets the GPU do its thing whenever it wants. So that is one big thing. The other thing I did notice, and I guess that's okay, I'm going to mention two things here, not one. And then anyway, so the preferred refresh rate, make sure that's just set on highest available. I tried this with the G-Sync enabled on just full screen, G-Sync enabled on windowed and borderless and full screen. G-Sync off, G-Sync left, G-Sync. I've tried all of the G-Syncs, and it just screws with Tarkov in my personal experience. So I prefer to leave it off for this game and just set your preferred refresh rate to highest available for whatever your display is. The rest of this stuff, you can do whatever. So yeah, so that's kind of your settings there. Now for PC settings, okay, because there's more to this, all this crazy. Yeah, so you can see like when I grab the window, and I just move the window a little bit. I did it before. Maybe it's over here. Yeah, when it's over here, so you can't see this right now. But when I move the window over here, like look at that frame rate. It's so bad. It's so bad. And then as soon as you stop and you click out of it, it comes back. So again, to reinforce Tarkov, super sensitive. So the other thing you're going to do is you're going to hit your Windows key and you're going to type in power, P-O-W-E-R. I don't know why I had to spell that, but I did. And then you're going to want to you're going to want to click on power and sleep. Okay, it's going to give you this screen here, and then you're going to come over here to additional power settings. All right. And when you're in additional power settings, it's most likely going to say balanced. Okay, it's going to have balanced checked. It'll have power saver as an option. And then show additional plans will be down here, and you're going to expand that, and high performance for you is probably going to be down here. And so you just want to click on high performance and let it be. Much like the maximum power, maximum performance on the GPU side of things, this is more for the whole PC, right? And so you're going to want to do that there. to make sure that your PC stays as awake and as active as possible. So those are kind of like the 3 things you want to do outside of things you want to do outside of Tarkov. You want to, again, get rid of full screen windowed stuff, disable your preview if you're rolling single PC streaming, highest available refresh rate, VSync off in the NVIDIA control panel, prefer maximum performance in the NVIDIA control panel, prefer high power, max power, whatever the hell it is, in Windows power options, and then in game VSync is turned on and your screen mode borderless or full screen for that. So that is kind of the segment of the video for like your power options and how to set up your refresh rate and what to do with your stream. Going into the second segment, I'm going to go into a map, and then we're going to take a look at some of the different graphics settings and how they actually impact your computer's performance by using all these fancy charts that we got on the screen. So let's hop in, and now let's take a look at that stuff. All right, so we're going to hop into a offline raid for this. Now, when you guys want to do things like check performance, I highly recommend you do not turn on AI. Turn on AI, something if you want to go in and test guns, test stuff, to shoot stuff. For frame rate, even if you turn on a low amount of AI, it is going to wreck your frame rate, something fierce. Typically, I do like playing on customs for the tests because there's a plethora of environment types, right? You've got good interior stuff at dorms. You've got factory style. You've got open fields with trees and all that kind of fun stuff. Let me just double check. Offline. All right, cool. And so something to consider when you guys do a performance test in terms of checking your frame rate. So this thing will load up. It loads up pretty quick. And then we're going to take a look at a few key factors here in terms of what will help you with your performance and what options do what in terms of hitting your PC for usage. I'll get into the streaming stuff a little bit, but this is going to be a bit more general. And so let's go ahead and hop in. So now you can already see while we're going to hop in how inconsistent the frame rate is. What I've kind of noticed, it's pretty normal, to be completely honest, depending on what you're looking at, depending on what you got going on. The frame rate isn't super smooth when you are streaming. When I'm not streaming, that line does stay pretty flat. It does have pretty significant dips from time to time. You'll see those like low peaks on the chart. Those are pretty normal. It's just the bits in between are a bit smoother when I'm not streaming. So yeah, so right now we can take a look at these are the graphics settings that I run. And so essentially my texture quality, I leave that on high in texture streaming. Reason for that, I have 8 gigs of VRAM and a powerful GPU, so I don't worry about it too much. And when you do this, when you allow higher textures, guys, what happens is the GPU does the work to unpack the textures. If you drop your textures all the way to low, depending on the engine, and from what I understand, most engines will move texture unpacking over to the CPU instead of the GPU, which puts more of a load on your CPU. And so there's really no reason to do it if you've got plenty of GPU headroom, which I do. I do shadow quality on low, and I'll go over why here in just a minute. Object LOD quality all the way down, helps with frame rate. Visibility, shadow visibility, all that stuff is low. I leave my AA on high just because I hate the jagging lines. Resampling, this is essentially how much does it oversample. You know, if you run it 1 times at 1080p, but then you set that to 2x, it runs at 1440p, and then if you set that to 4x, it runs it at 4K, right? And that's all that is. HBAO, SSR, I leave both those off. I really don't care too much about reflections in a PvP competitive game. And then AF as well, I leave that on to boot. Sharpness, I leave it at 1. And then these down here, these sliders, guys, they only matter if you have VSync turned off, I believe. Yeah. No. Yes? No. Resume. Yeah, when it's off, because right now I'm at 140, no problem. Anyway, so those are the settings that I use. Now you can see on screen, I'm only using about 60% of my GPU. I actually use more GPU when I'm staring at a menu than you do when you're in the game rendering everything. A few places that you're gonna notice huge frame hits is when you go into scope. And when you go into scope, if I remember correctly, this one goes out to Ryu. He informed me that the game actually uses a picture-in-picture, so it renders it twice. And that's why you can see like the frame rate 114, 140, and then back down to 114 again, because it overlaps. So essentially, if you're using scopes, which you probably are, that is why you're getting massive frame drops when you go ADS, because of how the scopes actually render. So there's that. Now, a few things to keep an eye out for. This is more on the streaming side of things, is your VRAM usage. If you guys are streaming and using the NVIDIA encoder, you want to leave about a gig and a half of your VRAM free in order to make it so you don't crash your encoder. So right now I'm using about 5 gigs of memory on my video card, mainly because I'm streaming. If I were to turn that off, I'd gain about a gig to a gig and a half back because of the encoder. So just something to kind of keep an eye out on. If you're streaming and you notice that your memory usage of your video card is right there at the threshold of how much video memory you have on your card, you're gonna crash your encoder, which will crash your stream. So just a heads up on that. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the shadow settings, right? And so this is actually a pretty good warehouse for this. So right now, let me get up on this platform. We'll run down here real quick. So I've played with shadow settings quite a bit to try to figure out like what is the best for stuff at distance. And so the reason why I do shadow settings on low, even though, you know, I mean, obviously FPS, but I can up my shadow settings without dinging my FPS too much, is just because I have way better visibility. If I actually go into this thing in graphics and I set these on ultra and my visibility to 200 and I resume, it's all dark in there now. If there's someone in there, they're gonna have a much better chance of hiding in the shadows, which is obviously bad for me and good for them, because I'm standing out here in the open like a complete doofus, right? So that's why I set my shadow settings all the way down to low and down to minimum. Now the shadow distance itself, right? So I can set this to ultra, leave the distance on low, and in there I don't see the shadows anymore. And all that distance does is you can see it like right here. As I walk forward, the line of this shadow is going to get more crispy, if you will, as I walk down. So you can kind of see how that line increases its crispy factor. And that's what the shadow distance does. And so the further out you push your shadow distance, or shadow visibility, the further out the crispiness is going to be. Now there's, you know, there can be, you can kind of see it down here on the grass, right, as I back up. There's arguments of, you know, should shadows be, or should you have them on ultra so you have better definition and whatnot, or should you leave them low so you have better visibility? And everything I've found so far, low is a pretty significant advantage, not only on the frame rate side of things, but just on visibility. Because even if you're running low, because if you run low shadows, so you can see like right now underneath that tree, it's all shadowed out and it's dark. Much like inside, this is where you get a huge bonus of running low shadows, because now the tree is no longer in shadow, and so if there's someone there, I can see them much easier, and so I prefer that. When it comes to some of the other settings, we'll take a look at the grass right here. So this is with the graphics settings set to high on AA. If we turn this off, it's now a jaggy mess. There's a lot more noise on the screen. I don't like that. It is stress on my eyes. It doesn't feel as obviously as good to me. And even out here, like, it gets super pixelated sometimes on the horizon, which then can kind of give you false positives of seeing somebody or seeing something. When you take a look at the performance side of things from running something like AA on this system, let's take a look. Right now I'm at 60% GPU usage, just staring at this. 4850 in terms of megs of RAM being used. We go back to graphics and we turn AA back up to max. We'll let it just settle for just a second. So we gained about 10% GPU usage. The memory didn't change much, 40 megs, so it's not that big of a deal for memory. Frame rate's still solid, mainly because, again, I have headroom with this GPU. So it's about 10% hit on your GPU for that setting. Let's see what else we got in here. So the object LOD quality, this essentially says objects that are further away, are they higher quality or lower quality? Let me see if I can't get to a place. Actually, this should do it here. So we'll take a look at like those trash cans and stuff. So right now we are on the lowest setting. We crank these up. So you can see here on the ground, right? See this concrete? See how it's still there even when I zoom out? And even zoomed out, let me see. I think we're getting a little more detail like in that trash pile out there. But if I go ahead and I drop down the LOD quality, the concrete that was in front of me by the forklift is now gone. And I believe we lost some of the detail out here. And you can see it as well, even if the scope's not over it and it's off to the side. Based on your zoom level, it pops in. I don't think I have a weapon without a scope. Let me do this real quick. Not that. Yeah, so even there, essentially what they're using, regardless of your scope, it looks like, unless I'm right there on the... I might be on the edge. Yeah, I was on the edge. So based on your ADS factor and how much your character or camera zooms in is when you'll start to see some of that object LOD popping in. Object LOD, let's take a look. Right now I'm at 61% GPU and about 4,900 megs. And so if we crank this all the way up, it dropped. That's interesting. 125 FPS, however. I think I was at 144 when I had that all the way down. Let's take a look at that real quick. Save, resume. Yeah, so I was. So essentially, the object LOD, I'm guessing it's doing something in the rendering pipeline where, well, it's not hitting the GPU harder. It is actually limiting your FPS for some strange reason. This engine seems super sensitive to performance, so I'll chalk it up to that. Let me put my scope back on. So that's going to be the object LOD. So we went over object LOD. We went over shadows and stuff. Let's take a look at sharpness real quick. So sharpness is, from what I've found so far, it hasn't actually impacted my frame rate too much, I don't think, if I remember correctly. We'll check it right now. 144 right now, 64 to 66% GPU. But what it does is sharpness is going to give you a more distinguished edge between objects. So right now, the grass itself, unlike with AA turned off, now it's all pretty blurry and kind of melded together. So if you take your sharpness value, and I'm going to crank it all the way to 3. I don't recommend this because it's pretty jarring. But now it almost looks like you've taken meds or morphine and whatnot. It's not a GPU hit by the look of it at all. Frame rate is still the same as is memory usage. So for sharpness, it's going to be what you kind of prefer. The standard setting, I believe, is 0.7. I like to run it at 1. And that gives me, I feel like it takes some of the blur out of it, makes it easier on the eyes, and it gives me less false positives and thinking I'm seeing something or someone in one of the bushes or whatever. All right. Overall visibility. So this here is going to be essentially your draw distance, if I remember correctly. So let me get over here to a place where I can see a wee bit better. And now your draw distance is going to have, or at least it should. It's been a while since I've messed with this one. I can't remember exactly. But it should have a pretty decent impact on your performance, just because it's how far out stuff gets drawn. That seemed obvious. Anyway, so let's take a look. So the things that are like way out there in the background, like the smokestack, should disappear. Possibly some of those trees, I'm not totally sure. It may only be things that are outside the borders of the map for fairness and whatnot. So we go from 3,000 down to 400. And yeah, so I don't think we actually lost any trees. We may have lost a couple. But we did lose, see, no smokestack. Smokestack. None? Yes. Like magic. And so basically what that will do is that will cull the stuff that's really far away and give you some headroom on your GPU back if you need it. I don't really think I noticed much here, but then again on this map, I lost the smokestack. And I really think that was about all we lost. Oh no, we lost the cranes. Oh no, we didn't. They're there. Okay, I legit think in this map the only thing I lost was that freaking smokestack, guys. Because I don't see anything else popping in through my scope aside from that stack. And I'm guessing they're doing that for fairness and stuff. So things like trees and bushes, there's some games where if you bring that stuff in, I know Rust is one of them for a while, or I should say was one of them for a while. If you mess with your graphic settings, a bush in the distance wouldn't even render on your screen. So there's a dude over there and he's all hunkered down. He's all crouched down. He's thinking he's all safe. He's in his bush and you're just like, what's up? And then he's dead. And he's like, dude, how can anybody see me? But anybody that was more than like 40 meters away, clear as day, because the bush didn't render. This game seems to be actually pretty fair from what I can tell when it comes to foliage and tree rendering and object rendering, right? There's not an instance where you're hiding behind something and it's rendering for you, but it's not rendering for somebody else. So they did a really good job there. So that's that graphical setting. A lot of these you'll have to kind of play with to see what works well for your system. Again, screen space reflections, totally up to you if you want them or not. It's just eye candy. If you've got the graphical headroom, go for it. If you don't, well, then you don't. And then the lighting. This really depends on what you want to do and how you want to hit it. I have HBAO does do a pretty big hit on lighting. I was wondering exactly what does it do. You can see on my gun right now, the lighting is much more kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? Faded, not so much faded. It bleeds. The shadows bleed a bit more because I believe if I turn that back off, the gun will not look like that anymore. Yeah, now it's just a lot more flat and more sharp. I think the other thing you'll get out of it as well, because they do have the color option, you get a bit of color bleed. You know, if you have something of color next to it, the light will refract. So that is that. On game settings, this stuff is up to you guys. I have the auto RAM cleaner enabled. Apparently with this, you're able to hit save and it just clears that out. Use physical cores only. I played with this a lot, on and off. I couldn't get it to really make a difference at all. And I'm not sure if that's just because I've got the 9900K, which is 8 cores, 16 threads. And so it's more than the game can use anyway, so it's not fighting it. This may have a bigger impact if you have something like a 7700K where it's 4 and 8. Or even some of the, I think it's, what is it? Is it the i5s that are dual core with 4 threads? That may be where this comes into more of an impact. Was there anything else here? Head bobbing, turn that down, and then FOV, crank it. You lose a little bit of your distance, but it's way better when you're running through in interior. And there's a dude right there, and if you're low FOV, you're never going to see him. So I think that just about covers it in terms of all the graphic stuff. You've got Z-blur, the aberrations, noise, and grass shadows. I leave all that stuff off. The shadows can take a pretty big hit. I'm not a fan of the noise. I'm not sure what the chromatic aberrations do, to be completely honest with you, but just turn them on. And then Z-blur is essentially their version of motion blur, and as we all know, motion blur is absolute dog. So there's that. So yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. Again, these are the settings that I run. And then the first part of the video was about kind of getting set up and the external things outside of Tarkov. The other thing you guys do have access to, I guess I'll bring it up super quick. If you guys go to your documents, Escape from Tarkov, there is a local and a shared INI. Inside this INI, you will find the things you'd expect to find in an INI. Some people out there say that if you change your lobby frame rate, game frame rate, if you're having problems, you can change these to your monitor's refresh rate in the INI, and that can help. I haven't had to do that, luckily, just to get to my refresh rate. That just kind of happened through, again, VSync on in the game and VSync off in the NVIDIA control panel. But if you're having any issues here, you can try to change these. Now, note, if you save, it's going to overwrite your things. So you may need to right-click on the file, and if you change it to a read-only after you save it, the game is not allowed and it won't be able to change it. That could cause issues. I claim zero liability on that. I'm just saying. I have read a few people make mentions that they think that people are getting banned for adjusting their INI. That'd be the first time I've ever actually seen it, even as a game dev. But do as you will and proceed with caution anytime you modify an INI. Yeah, I think that's actually going to do it, guys. So again, biggest things outside the game, if you're having frame rate issues and it's fluctuating all over the place, close all the extra crap that you can, because it will screw you. And then that should flatten out your frame rate. And then once you're in the game, I went over all those graphic settings to kind of show you what you'll get. The game itself is very picky. It has kind of a mind of its own. Even though, like, right now is a perfect example, I'm not at my frame rate cap. I'm only at 130. My GPU is sitting with 39% free usage. There's no reason I shouldn't be at 144, but game's in beta. They're still working on it. I'm sure they're going to improve this stuff. And yeah, so yeah. So if you guys want to see how to set up these graphs and stuff, I've got it. Other YouTube videos about it, I'll probably throw them below. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope this helps you guys, and hopefully you guys can get better, more stable frame rates, and may the scavs loot be heavy and their trigger fingers be about as good as mine. So as always, dudes, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. You can catch me live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cardo. Like, subscribe, all that crap, and stay humble. That's all I ask. GG. Peace out.